Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. My name is Terri Maxwell, and I'm delighted that you're here to talk about one of my all-time favorite subjects, and that's what I call business simple. How do you scale a business and simplify what seems very complicated? We've partnered with one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. She's an amazing CEO. She's CEO of ResultsResourcing, and we're going to be the Batman and the Robin of Business Simple, and the dynamic duo, the yin and the yang, and we're going to talk about the two aspects of scaling a business. So Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you so much, Terri. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about ResultsResourcing.
Well, ResultsResourcing really solves the #1 hiring problem that most small businesses faces, which is really finding quality talent. And we have a particular way of doing that by matching small and mid-sized businesses with vetted virtual freelancers over a technology platform that is merged with human-led staffing approaches.
Yeah, and I'm a customer of yours and a fan of yours, and send people to you guys all the time, because what I don't think we realize sometimes is how much time it takes to find great talent, and you guys really take that off of our plate as the entrepreneur. So Elizabeth, we've decided to cover this topic together as the yin and yang of business scaling. So can you just review what we're going to cover today?
Sure, and this is near and dear to my heart too, because this is a journey that I've been on and am still on. And it's really kind of thinking fresh about the business that you're creating, and how to think about that as a model that can evolve with you as your ideas and your markets change. And really, business simple is, it does boil down to some very simple things around scaling your operations and scaling revenue and finding repeatable ways to do that. And one of the things I admire most about you, Terri, is really how you've thought about how to systemize these things. And so it's really a perfect marriage of how do you scale your operations and how do you scale demand to generate more revenue in a profitable way. And those are really the topics of today.
Yeah, that's all we're going to cover, is really just the two things that you've got to master to really scale your business, regardless of what size it is. Those two things are always at the top of the list. So let me put that into perspective. I don't know about you, but when I became an entrepreneur, I had these illusions about what it would be like, and how wonderful it would be and how much money I would make. And what I found is the true entrepreneurial journey is not exactly like that. And the first phase I call an entrepreneur, and I can always tell when I meet an entrepreneur, because they've got great ideas and no money. And they're thinking about all of these great ideas, but they don't have any money because it's really, really hard in the very beginning. And then we get into this very difficult middle of the race where we go from being an entrepreneur, we're past the illusion of what it's like. Our idea is not as bright and shiny as it used to be. And now we're working really hard and we have a little bit of money left over. And this is typically the phase when a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners start thinking, well, maybe that job's not so bad after all. And they start looking backwards and stop looking forward. And I know I went through that as well when I first became an entrepreneur in 2002. After 9/11, ironically, is when I decided to be an entrepreneur. And I went through the same thing in 2003 and 2004. I'm thinking, maybe I should go back to work for somebody, because I was failing miserably. But when you get to the third phase, when you truly see yourself as a CEO of your enterprise, whatever size it is, that's when you create financial freedom. And ironically, the shift has to happen internally before you'll see the shift in your business. You've got to see yourself as the CEO of your business, not as an entrepreneur, not as a business owner, but see yourself as a CEO. And when I made that shift, when I literally put on my business card, I'm a CEO of this business, that's when I began to think about it differently. And that's when I really began to understand this wonderful thing that we call business simple. So Elizabeth, did you go through a similar journey like that?
Absolutely. In fact, the one thing I would add is that I guess it's probably a little like childbirth in a sense. You start out with this great idea of whatever that child is, that business child is, and that's that entrepreneurial stage. And it's the idea that really drives you. And then the reality sinks in, and it's just not nearly as easy as that you thought it would be, that your idea was so compelling that everyone would want it. And it's market positioning, and how do you get people to even know about you? And it's funny, when you get to that last block that you have there in the roadmap called CEO, it's almost that you revisit that vision again, but you've stepped up, and your vision of how to achieve that is more than the blocking and tackling, and it gets more strategic, and that creates a sense of freedom that is really the path to financial freedom.
That is so true. And there's nothing quite like building a business. I don't have children because I can't even raise my dogs, but I think that analogy is probably accurate, that the business really does evolve, and it has a little bit of a life of its own. And I know for me, I kept asking myself, why do some businesses scale easily and others struggle? Why is that person successful and I'm not? And how come they can do it and they can't? And that notion of just thinking about there has to be a way people are doing it caused me to start looking at things differently. And I started asking more questions. How do I consistently grow revenues? How can I simplify growth, because it's really complicated? I like to say there's millions of things to learn, but just a few things that you need to master. And rather than focusing on the millions of things you need to learn, why not just focus on the things that you need to master? And the last question I asked is, can growth be predicted? Is there a roadmap? And before we talk about what that roadmap is, Elizabeth, I know you've gone through some of these same gut-wrenching questions. Can you just share a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in a sense, that for me, it might also almost be the most compelling, in the sense that, I'm technology oriented and I'm systems and process oriented. And so I came into the entrepreneur's journey with that foundation. I didn't need to learn it. Yet it's still hard, even with my instinct about how do I automate this? How do I develop a process so our clients can work with us effectively? It was still hard. And so I think that it really is a strategic question about, what is the roadmap for your entrepreneurial journey? And it involves, automation and process and all that, but it's mindset and a whole lot of other things that go into successfully navigating the journey, because there are a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, and so let's give people what the roadmap looks like. There's a pattern that I saw in my own business, and I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 2 decades, and I began to see a pattern in my own businesses, and now I have a portfolio of companies, but also in the clients that I served. And the revenue level correlated very closely with the types of challenges they would have. And I started seeing this pattern in 2004 and 2005 and 2006. One of our clients back then was a company called Holy Guacamole. And I saw that as their revenue changed, they had very similar challenges to some of my other clients that were at that same revenue level. And so I really began to develop this methodology, this business evolution methodology, that really helps entrepreneurs really figure out where they need to focus. And today we're going to be talking about the 2 things that all of these phases need to focus on. But I can tell you emphatically, in 95% of the clients I coach and consult with, depending on the revenue level of your business is where you need to focus. So if your business is under 10K a month, there's 3 fundamentals that you need to focus on. We're going to be talking about one of those today. If you're in the 10 to 30K, and by the way, 84% of all businesses are either in launch and shape. 84% of all businesses are in launch and shape. So if you're there, you're in good company. In this place, this is where you really have to begin to shape the business and really balance this fulcrum of what I call business simple. When you start to really scale the business, these are where you start to put these building blocks in, but they all boil back to these same 2 elements that Elizabeth and I are going to be focusing on. In the evolve phase, that's where you really put a management team in place, and you as the founder begin to try to work on the business and not in the business, if you've ever heard that phrase. And then 2 to 5 and above 10 million are really where the fun is. But these other 4 phases, if that foundation of business simple, what we'll be talking about today, is not solid, then your business will go backwards. And it will be this very difficult phase, which we're going to show you a visual of today, of moving forward and stepping back and moving forward. And it'll feel like 2 steps forward, 1 3/4 steps back. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And the foundation Elizabeth and I are going to be sharing with you, what I call business simple, will help you not to have those ups and downs. So Elizabeth, any thoughts on the business evolution model?
I was just going to say, the other thing that I found, frankly, comforting was that when you're starting a business, you can feel so alone. And, you know, with your idea, even if you have a small team or a large team, you can feel like it's you against the world. And I think that seeing that there's a pattern, an established pattern, and kind of fitting yourself in, even if you don't fit perfectly, you can kind of see the flow of this entrepreneurial journey. And frankly, it helps you stop trying to reinvent the wheel, that there are core solutions that apply, and frankly, they're fundamentally related to the same thing in terms of scaling operations and scaling demand for whatever's going to generate revenue. That I found it that very helpful to have this larger perspective, and I wasn't so inwardly focused on where I personally was with my business, because it really fit this model that Terri's explained here.
And remember, 84% of all businesses are in launch and shape. Now, what I found is that in all 6 phases, there were the same 2 challenges. And that's where we get the concept of business simple: growing revenue consistently and profitably, and then scaling supply, which is people, process, and tools. So regardless of business size, type, or industry, all companies face the same 2 challenges: growing revenue and scaling supply. And Elizabeth, I think in your industry and in the clients that you help serve, you see that the people challenges tend to be one of the biggest obstacles that they have.
It definitely is, because people immediately think if there's something to be done, they need a person to do it. And I think there's a choice: people, process, or tools. At the very least, process will help you need fewer people or more specialized people. Tools may, through automation, help you get something done without using people. And then there's so many options now about which people to hire for what tasks. And so really, I think those 3 things are so crucial to think about when you're going to scale your ability to deliver on your value proposition.
Love that. So these same 2 challenges that I saw is what I call business simple, like just strip everything down to really focusing on one of 2 things: demand. You know, to grow and scale profitably, you really need revenue growth that's stable and consistent. We're going to be talking about that today. Secondly is to ensure consistent growth. You've got to automate some of those functions. And then on the supply side, you really need to manage that supply side, including your management, through automation while reducing costs based on volume. Let me give you a picture of what this looks like, because this is what really wears us down as an entrepreneur, is our business does this, and inconsistent revenue really impedes your progress. And my phrase is, I call it Groundhog Day, like, oh, here we go again, it's Groundhog Day. And what you really want to see is your business look more like the blue line, where you're going to have these dips, particularly if you're under $1 million in revenue, you're going to have these dips. But you really want to be making progress and not feeling like you're losing progress. Elizabeth, have you experienced any of those kind of dips in your business?
Oh my God, I probably have more twists and turns than that. I think it's normal. But again, it's going back to knowing that you're on a roadmap that many other businesses are on, and you're not alone. This is something normal, and you need to just take the time to build the strategies and take the actions to keep moving in that northeastern direction.
And so let's talk about what that looks like, because this is where supply and demand really have to work together. And this is what I call meaningful progress. I'm a big believer in setting intentions as rather than goals. So I'm going to set an intention of where I want to be a year from now. And it's not going to work out exactly the way that I want, but you really do have to manage this fulcrum between supply and demand. So I get some revenue, then I've got to deliver my product or service. I get some more revenue, I have to deliver my product and service. What Elizabeth and I want to share with you today is some methodologies so that you can begin to make that a little more seamless, so it will look more like this rather than the one that goes up and down that we previously talked about. So it should feel more like climbing stairs rather than Groundhog Day. Elizabeth, anything you want to add to that?
Totally agree.
All right, so let's talk about this fulcrum. So if you know, if you're familiar with a seesaw is basically a board that goes back and forth, but in the center of a seesaw is a very important thing called a fulcrum. And the fulcrum is what balances the seesaw. And that's what Business Simple is balancing the seesaw. So I want to talk a little bit more about scaling supply, because too often people think only about growing revenue and then they get too much work and then they can't deliver against it. And so I want to make sure that you're really thinking of it as a balance. I've got to get revenue, got to deliver with people, process, tools, get more revenue, deliver people, process, and tools. And Elizabeth, I'm going to really draw heavily on your experience here with how you do that and how you help your customers scale this wonderful little side of the fulcrum. Are you ready to do that with us?
Absolutely.
All right, so take it away. Tell me a little bit about scaling operations.
Well, this really is about making the business run. I mean, you have a great idea, you've got some demand for whatever, it is you do for a living to execute your vision. And as that is the temptation, is you focus, just on growing that. And then you figure, you scramble, to really fulfill that demand. And particularly if you want to fulfill it in a certain way, delivering a certain kind of experience, that really scaling your operations to deliver on your value proposition is huge. And as I was mentioning before, scaling supply is equal to operations, basically. And it's three key things: people, process, and tools. And we really could start with any one of them. And it really depends where you start with where you are, with your business. But I think people start with people, because it's, you can talk to somebody and say, I need you to go do this, and somebody will do that. But basically, that's very limited, because people can only do one step at a time. If you haven't thought about establishing a process that this is how we do this, so something is consistently done by more than one person, in your operation, that's kind of a next step you need to take. And then rather than hiring people, sometimes you use tools, whether it's using simple email to get messages out as opposed to snail mail. I mean, that seems so obvious now, but at one point that was a trade-off, in history. And now more and more there's CRMs and AI and all these different ways to get work done. And it's really thinking about how all these three things come together in the best possible way for your business. But very much people tend to gravitate to people because they're familiar with hiring people. And I'll be talking more about the people options that you have. But really, to scale your operations, you do have to think about the right people for your team, not just people that you might trust, but really, what are the skills and capabilities you need people to have, not only today, but for tomorrow, and starting to build the team that's going to help you get to wherever you want to build to. Then you really have to develop some skills around systemizing and automating. A lot of times I hear people say, well, we haven't gotten around to that. Well, it's really hard to outsource work to somebody else, whether it's somebody sit at the next desk or someone who's virtual to you, if you don't have a process for how that work gets done or what the customer experience should be like. So it doesn't have to be automated, but it really needs to, you have to think through what are the steps you want people to take to deliver on whatever it is that you're offering to the public. And you need to develop leadership skills that you're not always doing it yourself, but you're leading others to share your vision and to do the work in the way you want it to get done. And that really leads me to the last point, is valuing your time. And this is something that I think is overlooked a lot. You know, in the world of technology today with, you know, the Amazon.coms and things like that, it's so easy to, quote, do it yourself. But the question is, should you? Many times you're not sitting there thinking, well, I could spend the next 3 hours doing that, but maybe the opportunity cost of doing something administrative, as opposed to finding the right person, process, or tools to manage that administrative work that needs to be done, that's a trade-off. And I think more and more as entrepreneurs start to grow into business people and CEOs, they are starting to value their time and how costly it is to do something yourself, as opposed to investing in people, process, and tools so you can scale supply, scale operations.
And I completely agree. It's the number one thing that I see that entrepreneurs consistently do, and young emerging leaders, is they don't value their time, and they get like Atlas complex, and I've got to do it all, and I've got to do more, rather than looking for ways to move things off of their plate. And I think that's one of your favorite things to talk about.
Well, I'm a longtime fan of Peter Drucker, and for those of you that are a year or two younger than me, he was kind of the management guru. And truly, in the 1950s, he said, do what you do best and outsource the rest. And the man was brilliant, because I think that message still holds so true today. You know, whether you're talking about you as an individual or your team and building the right teams for your business, you know, everybody should be specialized and focused. Focus is crucial, and that's what this means. Do what you do best and outsource the rest. Because I think, you know, entrepreneurs do have competing priorities. Instead of, they're working in the business, getting the detailed work done, instead of working on the business, which is going to move you forward in that entrepreneurial journey. And plus, you really want to do what you enjoy. That's probably where your vision came from in the beginning. I have this great idea. That's what I want to do. You don't want to be doing the administrative work that is essential too, but not what you necessarily enjoy. And that's the kind of thing that wears you out. And so I think there is a way to grow your business by focusing on what you do best and the value you uniquely deliver, or your company uniquely delivers. And that's really where financial freedom and becoming that CEO that will take your business to the next level, that's where it happens.
And when you're able to scale operations, you're able to scale demand, because they're connected. And when you're able to scale both of those, that's the path to financial freedom. When you're working with your clients, how do you help them make that cost trade-off?
Well, one of the things we try to do is we've used automation a lot in the technology platform of Results Resourcing to deliver expertise, to help people understand choices they can make. And so when we design the system, we really help people try to think more about how was work done in the past and what are the options today. And so we facilitate flexible work models of today and the future. But basically, everyone's got these choices. In the past, there was really, everyone worked in a fixed model. You know, they had 9-to-5 jobs, they had dedicated careers. Most people were generalists. They were in marketing or in sales or in human resources or whatever it was, and pretty much largely on site. And today, this may seem like common knowledge, but it is a huge shift over the past few decades. There's flexible models exist where people are both employees and contracts. Companies have both employees and contracts. In fact, contractors. In fact, LinkedIn did a study where they basically said that the most successful businesses in the future are going to have a combination of employees and contracts, because some work needs to be done day in, day out and is core to your business, and other work goes up and down, helps you scale up or down based on demand or seasonality, or it's specialized marketing work that doesn't need to be done every day. And there's new models of employment that help you shift your cost structure based on what work needs to be done. As I mentioned before, a human can do it, people, or a machine can do it through process and tools. People also have portfolio careers. Most of the younger generations don't expect to be with one company for their entire lives and really put together careers that span a lot of different experiences, which means they also bring a lot of different experiences to the table. And a lot of freelancers, which is what I specialize in today, they have portfolio clients. So they'll have a whole set of employees, of clients. The most popular job, frankly, is a virtual assistant. And a virtual assistant is skilled at working with a lot of different clients and delivering great value to you as the client, knowing that they have all these other work experiences to draw upon. And I think that's leads to the next point, that increasingly people are more and more specialized in what they do. And generalists are less common, because specialization is really what the markets want, what people want. They want people to know them and be able to tailor your value proposition to what they need, and that requires specialization. In social media, for example, that's common, that marketing is social, but that's a very specialized need to do social media well. So I think we're in a world of specialization to get more done. And then nowadays, it's very common for people to work on-site and remote, employees, and contract workers. So there's a lot shifting in terms of, work models that are available to you, and you can really tailor them to what your business needs.
I love that. And I know you're going to help us really determine what to outsource and how to think about that. But you've got this really great strategy for managing the supply side and thinking about it like an ecosystem. Can you share a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, well, I think people get a little intimidated thinking about scaling a business and where do they find all these talent, these people and things like that. But I think this is a really normal thing. I mean, if you just think of your household, you're in the center of it, and you've got, a plumber and babysitters and all these people to around you. That's your talent ecosystem, as a human being at home. And businesses have always built that too, where the business is at the center, and they might have a marketing department, and they might have an outsourced attorney. And I think that that's really the model to think about. It's not that unusual that, think about you and your business in the center, and you've got core employees, and then you want to have expertise, whether it's through core employees or flexible freelancers, and that they're all providing the expertise that your business needs to grow. And frankly, that combination of core employees and flexible freelancers gives you business agility, because that allows you to scale up or scale down depending on what's happening, in your market, or whether you're trying a new idea, and rather than make all these hard investments in something, you might want to try it with freelancers that have done it before for someone else or in a different market. So it really allows you to be more nimble, to be thinking about talent in terms of an ecosystem, and how do you put the different components together in a way that's going to make sense for you without having a huge burden, financial commitment to worry about, that allows your business to be more agile.
And I want to comment on that, because frequently people come to me as a demand generation expert of really good at growing the top line, and they think they have a demand generation issue when in reality it's a supply issue. And if they would get and bring in some of the expertise, it would free up their time so that they could solve the demand generation expert. And so I like thinking about it as an ecosystem where you're really going to have people that have specialty skills that are not a full-time employee, that they're going to be taking things off of your plate so that you have the time to grow the top line.
Yeah, and the thing about talent ecosystems is you commit to the concept, and it's something you just keep building, because whether you're talking about a core employee or a contractor, people have lives. They move, they get sick, they take a different job, or they go a different direction. And so what you really need to do is build a robust ecosystem of people that you can draw upon without making significant financial commitments that really allow your business to shop online, in a sense, to grow when you need to grow. So I think talent ecosystems is a great concept to have in your mind, and it's how you build it for your business that is really a very creative endeavor. And
my first thing as a CEO is anytime I get taxed and I've got too much on my plate, I'm immediately thinking, who can I outsource this to? Who can I outsource this to, rather than how do I get more done in the day? So how do you balance that up and down between having enough talent and not having too much on the bench?
Well, I think I'm going to start with not having too much on the bench first, because I think that frankly, let me stop. I should start really with the problem and the solution. So the problem for most small businesses is lack of qualified talent. And qualified means a lot of different things. They can't compete for the best talent because bigger companies, have more to offer, or they don't know who the talent is, or they're not sure who they can trust, or sometimes they don't even know exactly the skills they need. They know what they want to accomplish, but they don't necessarily know all the skills they need. And the solution really, I think, is a combination of core employees plus skilled freelance workers, because you can get some superbly qualified freelance workers to come in and work for your company and feel like it's, a pearl assignment to come work for your company, even though they might not want to join it full time. You don't have to worry about that. You can have high level skills come work for your business and advance your business, without having to make that core employee decision. And to me, what it boils down to is knowing where to go, knowing what talent you need, and thinking through the skills that you need to solve a particular problem, and knowing where to go look for it, but not feeling like you have to do it yourself. One of the biggest, in the sense of finding the people yourself, one of the things that I see a lot of people do is they value trust highly, which of course is important. But I find people trusting somebody that their neighbor said, oh, I know somebody that can go do this. And so they will hire that person, even at contract or full-time, based on that trust of the neighbor, without really trusting whether that neighbor understands their business and what the core skill requirements are. And so there are many ways now through talent platforms, recruiters, or combinations, hybrids like us, and we're a platform and a recruiting agency together, really to solve that trust issue, that to help you think through the talent you need, the skills that you need, and find trusted people that, frankly, your neighbor's not going to know. And so there's new ways to think about trust, because trust does not come from just having somebody you know. You really need to understand who you need and find new ways to find trusted resources to scale your operations.
And I think that's what I love about being a client of Results Resourcing, is that you actually help me think through that. I'm too close to it. It doesn't matter what position I'm hiring for, a business development person, a PR, a virtual admin, that you help me actually think through what the qualifications need to be. And then you help me find the candidates, and I don't have to wander through the woods wasting all of that time.
No, exactly. I was a power user of a lot of the talent platforms that are out there before I started Results Resourcing, because I was hiring a lot of freelancers, and I happened to have a corporate background and did a lot of hiring and managing of people. So I had a lot of skills in that area, and I really tried to translate what I felt the gaps were with the online platforms, that they didn't help you build a job description. They gave you blank fields to fill out, but they didn't help you think through, should I hire a freelancer or not? Or what should they be able to do? What are the top skills that are required? And so one of the things we sought to do is, again, use technology to deliver expertise, to build surveys to make it easy for you to just answer questions, which at the end of the day tells us everything we need to know about the people you want. And then I also felt it was important to have a human involved. A lot of times, you go on to big platforms and there's no human being to ask a question of. And you're really on your own. You type in a certain kind of skill and 1,000 profiles shows up. How do you wade through that? And so our goal was to, through technology married with human beings, to make it easy for people to define what they need. And then we do the work to go find it for you and give you choice solutions in a very short period of time. So you can build your business.
I can speak from experience. The candidates that you guys sourced for us were far superior to anything that I found on my own. I'm curious. I wrote the book, The New World of Work, because I was fascinated with the freelance culture and millennials in particular adopting it very quickly. Why did you really feel like, even before you started Results Resourcing, that freelancers were a really, really valuable asset in a business?
Well, I was working for a number of startups and consulting for them, and I was in that position of needing to find talent. We had finite capital needs and tons of work to be done, and it was very hard to attract top candidates to be hired, plus there wasn't the money to hire them, and many people weren't interested in equity and things like that. So by necessity, we started looking for other sources of talent, and freelancers were just kind of a natural. And once we started to look at freelancers as a great source of talent for, in particular, non-core work, not if you're developing some unique IP, that's probably people you want employees for, but non-core work is really where freelancers can excel. And they were so attractive because of availability, flexibility, and the skill level that they offered. And what you see on the slide were all the reasons, all the benefits to hiring freelancers, because of the ability to shift, your operations up or down, offloading the non-core work, getting the kind of quality talent you couldn't afford to hire, trying out new ideas, building your value differentiation, trying things out. But, at the end of the day, it's a way to scale up and down and to optimize the capital you have. No one has unlimited capital, but you have an unlimited need for great skills. And so orchestrating the right way, it's a perfect marriage of a core team plus freelancers can provide the business agility to really scale a business.
Awesome. And before we talk about the demand generation side, getting this side of the fulcrum balanced is important. You can't generate demand if you can't have a very flexible way of offloading the work. How do you help your clients really make that cost-benefit trade-off?
Well, this was a really interesting study that I saw by 10X Management, which is a talent platform for technology contractors. And they did a study of, what on the left-hand side, if you looked at work time, 49 weeks out of a year, and hiring a freelancer for $150 an hour versus hiring a full-time employee, if you go to all the additional costs of a full-time employee, the cost of that person for 49 weeks of work, all things being equal, was a little over $312,000. And cost that same work done by a freelancer would cost 6% less. So I think that was an argument, to hiring talented freelancers for different work. But what to me was more compelling was really on the right side. You probably don't need the freelancer for 49 weeks a year. And you can hire the same quality talent, $150 an hour, but let's say you only needed them for 20 hours a week. To get what you needed done for, say, a 6-month project or spread out over a year, you only needed 1,000 hours. Well, then your cost is $150,000, which is 52% less. That's why I think freelancers can be so compelling. Again, there is a core team that you probably need as full-time employees as you scale, which do have all these other burdens, but it's the right thing because they're essential to your core value proposition. But in many cases, for 50%, you can hire really top grade talent to help you with those special projects that really helps you optimize your capital. So I think that just using this example that started with 10X Management, but I've extended it to show this additional piece on the right, I think there's a real cost benefit to considering freelancers for some of the work your company needs to have done.
And so if I translate this, the chart on the left says that it's more economical to hire a freelancer if the work time frame is equivalent than to hire a full-time employee, unless it's a core function. And then what's on the right is the majority of the time, and I know this is true in my business as well as a lot of the clients that I coach and consult with, they don't need a full-time equivalent. And they can use a lot less hours because it's a more highly specialized or highly focused skill.
Absolutely. And I think that the key is core versus non-core, because some people may have been reading about the California legislation about Uber and are they contractors or they're core employees. And that's really the problem you get into on the left-hand side, because if somebody should be an employee, that's what they should be. And calling them a contractor doesn't mean legally or from a tax perspective that they're not, really should be employees. And I'm not trying to talk around that. I'm really focused on the work that is non-core to the company's value proposition, but still essential. Again, do what you do best and outsource the rest. It's outsourcing the rest, which I think can be so compelling because it's essential if you're going to scale operations. And I think freelancers are a great choice, and they make financial sense.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to pull you back in also when we talk about the demand gen. So now we're going to cover the other side of the Business Simple fulcrum. And we're going to learn some of the things that Elizabeth talked about so we can scale the supply side so that we can focus on growing revenue. And Elizabeth will be available to answer questions in just a little bit after we cover the demand gen side. I want to reiterate one of the misnomers, one of the big mistakes that we make as entrepreneurs. We think we need more revenue, but a lot of times we actually need to scale the supply side first so that we can have the time to focus on growing the revenue. I'm going to give you a couple of my tips, methodologies for consistently growing the revenue, but I want to start with the concept of what demand generation is. Most of the time we think as an entrepreneur we need more revenue, and that's true, but what we really need is more demand. Demand is when people want our products and services and they're coming to us rather than us feeling like we have to get them to buy from us. And there's a proven 2 or 3 decades old methodology called demand generation that starts with some very simple things. Buyers or potential buyers need to be aware that you exist first. They're not just going to come to your website and buy. And if you think they are, try it and you'll see it won't work. You can spend thousands of dollars on ads and you're going to get people that come to your website and bounce right off. So there needs to be a level of awareness that you exist. Secondly, they need to be interested in what you have to offer and say. That, quite honestly, is where most people go wrong, is they're talking at the buyers rather than talking about what the buyers are interested in. And so if you have content on your website that's all about you, the buyer's going to bounce right off of the website and they're not going to connect with what you're saying. Instead, you really want to speak to them about what they care about, what their problems are. The third thing is desire, and they need to both want what you have and need what you have. And that is really about making sure that the right people are coming to your website. And then the last thing is they'll take action. But that process of the basics of demand generation, most entrepreneurs I work with, they just want people to buy. And the problem is there's not enough people that are aware, and there's not enough people that are interested, and there's not enough people that really want what you have in order to get enough people that take action. And that's the part that requires patience. And it's one of the reasons why I always advise my clients to focus on the supply side first so that they've got the bandwidth to really build awareness and grow interest and generate desire. Now, there's a methodology that I developed for myself because I don't like to sell. I'm a middle school teacher that became an educational consultant that found out I had this gift for business. And I'll never forget when the vice president of the company, I was 26, and they were preparing me to be a vice president. And I had a great career with them, 4+ years with this educational software company. And his name was Neil Johnson. And Neil said, "Terri, we're preparing you to be a vice president in the next year." And I'm like, "Great, I knew I could do it." And he said, "First, you have to learn how to sell." And I was just like, forget it, I'm out. It's not happening. No way am I ever going to do that. And Neil really challenged me. He was one of my mentors as a young emerging leader. He challenged me to find a way to think differently about selling and to think about building relationships instead. And so over the course of the last 30 years of my career, I've defined this methodology called authentic demand generation to really build a relationship with the buyer every step of the way. And we're going to share with you what that is. And Elizabeth will talk a little bit about how she uses this methodology as well. So first thing is awareness. The way that I like to think about it, rather than getting someone to buy, I like to start and think about, well, what would I say to my friends? Well, I would ask them questions about their business. I would share some tips with them. And so if you go to any of my websites, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see content on there that are tips or our social media pages, inspirational ideas. And the idea is I'm not trying to get anyone to buy. I'm just simply building a relationship with them. For the second step, to be interested, this is where somebody actually follows your brand. They're connected to your social media page. They've friended your page on Facebook. They've gotten into your database because you have a really cool tool on your website that they want to have a connection with. You attend a webinar like this. Maybe with what we're sharing with you, you'll become a follower of Results Resourcing and be interested in what they have to say. So you'll notice that those first two, if you think of friends and followers, they're less about you and more about the buyer. What do they care about? What matters to them? And then when you get to desire, that's when somebody really becomes a fan, and maybe they'll try something that you're doing once, or they'll register for a program or something along those lines. And they're really just sampling you. I like to equate this to, if you've ever gone to a grocery store on a Saturday, at least in the United States, there's just tons and tons of sampling. And I decide whether or not I'm going to become a fan of that product based on the sampling. And that's what that third step is. And then finally is act. If the sampling is good, then I'll evolve into a fanatic. And if I have a great experience with your brand, I'm going to share it again and again and again. So Elizabeth, as somebody who's focused on the supply side, when you really think about the other part of managing the Business Simple fulcrum, how do you think about growing your business and growing your relationships with prospective buyers?
Well, it's funny you shared the story that you did about your VP promotion, because I don't like to sell either. I mean, I like to talk about value, and I like to educate people, and I'm passionate about what I do. And so I guess until I met you, Terri, I didn't really think about it this way, but I've always been more really about, let me tell you about the gig economy, or let me tell you about freelancing and how they can help you. Let me tell you about how technology or process can help you systemize your business. Those things are exciting to me. And so I tend to talk more about those things just naturally, because I don't like sales either. And as I used to tell some friends, when it comes to hiring a freelancer, it's not like having this cashmere sweater that you've been admiring for 6 months and suddenly it's on sale. If you're not ready to hire somebody, it doesn't matter what it costs. It's not a good investment. And so really educated buyers are really important. And I think the process of friends, followers, fans, fanatic builds that relationship, which stands the test of time. And not everyone's going to move through these phases, and that's fine. It's just better to get clear on who you are matched with and build those relationships. So I'm very comfortable with how you describe this.
Yeah, and you could go to Elizabeth's website at Results Resourcing and look under Insights, and you'll see how she's sharing tips and advice for small business owners as a way of building that relationship. And the odds are, when they're ready to find the perfect freelancer and they don't want to wade through thousands and thousands of profiles, they're going to hire Results Resourcing to do that. You can also go to Succeed on Purpose and check out our free tools. And those tools will give you something of value so that when you're ready to buy something from us, you'll think of Succeed on Purpose. Another way to think about this is, rather than thinking of funnels, I hate the word funnel. I hate the whole click science methodology, because it's really inauthentic. So rather than thinking about it that way, think about it with what we call authentic demand generation. When I teach this to entrepreneurs, we actually teach them in their business how to do every one of these steps. The first step in the relationship is the buyer has to become aware that you're there. They need to know that your solution exists because they probably don't know. And keep in mind, people don't want what you have unless they're first aware that you exist. So how can you give them something of value, a blog post, a quiz, an assessment tool, an inspirational quote, something like that, where they're like, wow, that's really cool. I'm now aware that that brand exists. And then what happens is as they become interested, they'll get on your list, they'll download something, or they'll ask to get a copy of your blog on a regular basis, or they'll share information that you've developed. And that process of building a relationship with them, when they're ready, that's when they'll become a fan. And if they have a great experience with your brand, they'll share it again and again and again. And my secret to success, every one of the businesses that we have in our portfolio, more than 60% of our customers come from fanatics. They meaning somebody else told them about us, more than 60%. So we don't have to spend a lot of money on advertising because we do such a good job at building relationships, building friends and building followers and building fans and building fanatics. And the way to do this in your business is to think about, what does my buyer need before they buy? Not what special can I give them, but what do they need before they buy? How can I serve them before they buy? And if you'll develop content, and it can be sharing content that other people developed, or graphics or tools or insights, if you can share those early and often, then the buyer will start to build a relationship with you. And then when they're ready, they'll buy from you. So Elizabeth, before we talk about balancing the fulcrum, and then we'll summarize and take some questions from the audience, how have you developed the strategies to build? What types of things are you doing to grow awareness and to grow interest and to build desire?
Well, I think the first comment I will make is that this whole concept really made sense to me. And because I was more interested in generating demand than selling, that reinforced it. But I think a commitment to this concept and giving it time is really important, because it takes a little while for this to start happening. So you really have to believe in it and commit to it, but it really does work. And for us, it was kind of a no-brainer, because when we first started Results Resourcing, nobody knew it existed. No one knew that you could have a combination of a technology platform, to source talent, and a staffing agency together for virtual freelancers. It was kind of a new idea. So we had to work hard on making people even aware of what we did. And I started, between all the things Terri's mentioned, but, networking groups, things like that would have a commitment to me as well, accountability to me to listen to my message, help me shape my message so it would be appealing to let people know. So every step of the way, there were things that we did to move forward, and we've got people in all different categories now. And I would echo what Terri said. The vast majority of our business comes from people that were really happy with what we did, or frankly, freelancers that like our whole process and have told their clients about us. You need something else other than what this particular freelancer did, then go to Results Resourcing to find it. So it's just really interesting and frankly very validating to see this really come to pass. So, but it does require patience and a commitment to doing it.
And that's exactly why you really have to focus on this balance, this fulcrum. And if you just picture that, a seesaw, you've really got to get some things off of your plate. If you want to be financially free in your business and scale your business, you've got to get things off of your plate and really figure out what you can outsource to a freelancer in order to really focus on the demand. And that managing that fulcrum, although sometimes it feels like, oh, I just can't do it. Yes, you can. If you'll just bite a little bit off at a time. Just find one thing that you can outsource so you can get 2 to 5 hours back in your week. And then that 2 to 5 hours you can invest in building demand generation. And it's not difficult. It just requires time and a committed daily effort to ensure that you're balancing that. So Elizabeth, did you have to go through that same thing of managing that fulcrum?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like the cobbler's children. There were things that I kept doing myself without valuing my time, or that my companies kept doing ourselves. And, you know, over time, we ended up taking the second lesson that we, you know, help our clients understand. A great freelancer could go do this for us. And we've repeated that time and time again. You think we've learned, but, you know, as we continually work on the business versus in the business, we discover new things that we could outsource so we could focus, you know, on what we do best. So, you know, we learn this lesson ourselves every single day. And I can't tell you the number of stories we hear from clients that, oh, it's, you know, that taking our survey to define what they need was much easier than they thought. It was going to be very intimidating. And then one step at a time, you know, they take the process and start outsourcing, and it's like, oh, wow, that was great. I got this new need now. So it's really gratifying to see people become more free and to find ways to systemize their business.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people think they have to have a lot of work to outsource, but you can to a virtual admin or to an accountant or to a social media person, you can offload just a couple hours a week and get that time back in your day, so you can generate more demand.
It can be just a few hours, you know, a week. And the other thing I don't think I really mentioned is a lot of people come in and say, oh, I don't have much budget. I can't afford to spend very much. And there's a couple ways to think about it. First of all, if you find a qualified, trusted resource, which, you know, is our specialty, you can get a lot done for 2 hours a week. But the other thing is that if you're sure that you can't afford any more than 20 hours an hour, and that's 2 hours a week, you know, that's $40. But if you spent $100 and got a higher quality person, you might get a whole heck of a lot more done in those 2 hours than a less experienced, less expensive person. So really it's, you know, budget's important, but it's really what you get for your budget that's most important. So I think that thinking about price and what you can get great talent for very few hours a week, because the freelancers have portfolio careers and portfolio clients. And it's really important to get the most, what you can out of, spend a little bit more to get the better talent.
And that's what I love about you guys, that you really help educate me, the customer, on striking that balance. And because, you know, you don't know if you don't know, and you guys are experts at this, and it's very helpful. So let's wrap up, and we'll take some questions. You know, business is complicated. So just keep it simple, supply and demand. And if you can just focus on those two, and I always recommend really beginning the balance on the supply side first before the demand side, you'll have the time to really put into the demand side. And I guarantee you this, if you have the time to put in the demand side, you'll get more of the customers you want to work with if you've got the time. So that's why I always advise clients to really offload on the supply side first. On the revenue side, revenue should grow consistently. It should not be up and down like this. It really should be, you know, these little loop-de-loops, and then eventually it'll feel like you're climbing stairs. And if it's not that, that means something in the demand generation system is off, and you need the time to really figure out what that is. And then Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about the supply side, since that's your expertise, and then we'll take a couple of questions?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the talk, this is really a circular process, people, process, tools, because all three things will help you scale your operations. And in picking the right thing at any point in time is what's so crucial. And I obviously am a firm believer that doing what you do best and outsourcing the rest is a key component to scaling your business, scaling your revenue, and optimizing finite financial resources. And I'm a big believer that freelancers can make a huge value add to your business, whatever the role is.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We have a couple of questions that have come in, and if you're still with us, please feel free to ask questions. Elizabeth, one of the questions is, how do you know if a role should be a freelancer or an employee? What's your test there?
It goes back to the notion of core work. So if your business is, say, software development or something that's graphic design, things like that, that's your core business. So hiring a contractor that does what your core business is probably questionable, and it's getting more and more scrutiny. But if you're any kind of a business that is selling a product or a service, core is probably not your social media or building your website, or doing data entry or a virtual assistant. Those are all kind of non-core activities. And so I think that's the safe route to take, is to think a little bit about what's core, what's non-core, and focus on outsourcing the non-core stuff, because it has to get done. Somebody's got to do it, but it's better to have it done by someone that isn't also trying to deliver on your core value proposition.
That's excellent advice. And there's another question that's related. How do I decide what should be outsourced versus delegated, and where that's a fine line? How do you manage that fine line?
Well, that's, that is a fine line. And some of that goes back into developing, strategy and leadership qualities around determining what your talent ecosystem looks like, and what are the things that are best to have in-house because they are core to your value proposition, or they deal with intimate customer details, things like that. Those might be things you want to have a trusted employee, for privacy and security and all those sorts of things to delegate to, versus things that, just need to be done, but really aren't core to the business. And then I think then it's a matter of being clear on the skills that you need and the process that needs to be done, so it can be clearly delegated to somebody else, providing the direction so it can be done the way you want it done, which needs to happen when you're delegating internally as well.
Absolutely. And then a question on the demand side is, what if you have happy customers, but they're not generating leads? So I'll take that one. There's two things about that. If you have happy customers and they're not referring business to you, it simply means that you haven't asked them in the right way. If your customers are happy and loyal, they will refer business to you, but you have to find a way to ask them in the right way. And there's a couple of strategies that you can do that. If you have a face-to-face relationship or a phone relationship with your customers, you can just simply say, John, I love working with you, and I'd like to have a couple more customers like you. Is there anybody in your network that you think I should talk to? And just ask them point blank. It's not, you're not taking advantage of them. You're letting them know, I enjoy working with you, and I just want to know if there's anybody else like you. The second thing that you can do is you can give them a discount that they can pass on to their clients for your business. So rather than discounting your value or your product, you can give them a referral discount that they can give as a gift. Those are two of the strategies that I recommend. And then the third way is a little more passive, and it's simply sharing your content and tips with them for them and encouraging them to share it with others. A lot of the leads that come into the Succeed on Purpose website are people who sent one of the tools or the programs that we have that are free, and our existing customers share those with their network, and then those people come back to our website. So again, it's really about value, and it's a little more passive to do it that way than the other two that are a little more direct. Elizabeth, any tips that you have for if you've got happy customers and yet you're not generating leads?
I would say after doing work with you, we've been following some of the tips that you just gave us, and they really do work. And the other thing that we have also done is gone out to clients and said, we've created a great success story together. Can we talk about it in a case study, which, basically talks about them being progressive, in terms of how they're thinking about scaling their business and giving them press in the context of a case study. So that's been something that's been helpful.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, and we're right at about where we need to be. Elizabeth and I would both like to invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn. Terri Maxwell and Elizabeth Eiss. We're very active on LinkedIn, and we would love to have you be in our network. And then one of the things I would encourage you to do is Elizabeth does a free talent strategy consultation where you really get her insight on your business, and she'll help you define your talent goals and scalability objectives. I know she really helped me with that, and I would encourage you to take advantage of that free. Her email address is on here, so it's eiss@resultsresourcing.com. And I just want to thank everybody. And Elizabeth, I want to thank you for doing this with me. It's an honor to be partnered with you in a lot of arenas. You're truly one of my all-time favorite CEOs, and
likewise.
I really value your company tremendously and the value that you bring our business.
Well, the feeling's mutual, and it was a pleasure to be on this webinar today.
Thanks, everybody. We'll make sure you get a recording of this. Thanks so much, and I hope everybody has a wonderful February, and we'll talk soon.
Take care. Thank you.